What's going on, everyone? Thanks for joining us today. So today we're going to get into our preview show for round number 4 at High Point. So first up, I just want to start by recapping what we just saw at round number 3. And as we go through, we'll kind of talk about what we can expect out of each guy as we move into round number 4. So round number 3 at Thunder Valley was pretty interesting. A few unexpected things and a few expected things. The weather was a bit of a factor. There was a lightning delay at the beginning of the race, which if you guys were tuned in for our preview show last week, you would have known about that. I did my best to draw attention to the potential thunderstorms that were looming over the racetrack last weekend, which I did get some hate for, saying that it's not going to rain, it's just Colorado weather and things like that, which obviously I'm not a weather forecaster. I'm just trying to give you guys the information that I have. And I did specifically say that we could run into a lightning delay, and sure enough, the start of the race was hit by a lightning delay. Another thing that I don't think was talked about quite enough was that it was extremely windy there at Thunder Valley, so those guys were absolutely pushing it with some really high winds. There was canopies flying everywhere. It sounds like it was an absolute massacre as far as the canopies go. Most teams lost their canopies, even though they did their best to keep them, obviously. Thankfully, it did not end up being a mud race, so that was cool to see. We did get some rain before moto number 2, but all in all, it was some pretty good racing. The conditions were okay, and the racing was great. So starting in the 250 class, at the top, obviously we have Hayden Deegan. So we did see Hayden make another pretty big mistake with Tom Vial chasing right behind him. However, he did rebound quite well, and he ended up taking home the moto win nonetheless. But we did see a lot more fight out of Tom, and he also showed that he had the speed. However, Hayden doesn't really seem to be bothered by that. He's still kind of playing his same mental games that he was playing with Levi, but now with Tom. He even went as far as to call Tom's pass attempt on him cute. So I thought that was pretty funny, kind of cool to see him playing that game. It seemed to work with Levi when he was saying that he would fade, and sure enough, he is fading at the end of the moto so far. So I'm not saying that Levi is out of shape, but what I am saying is what Hayden is doing appears to be working. If we look at Hayden's results from High Point last year, he went 2-6 for third overall, and he almost won moto number 1 when he took the lead from RJ Hampshire when he made a mistake. They battled all the way to the last lap where RJ just squeezed him out at the finish. I do expect Hayden to be pretty comfortable there this weekend, and I do think he's probably your favorite for the win. Moving on to Tom Vial. So Tom is obviously not out of the championship fight yet. He is coming around, and he's tied for second in the points with Chance Hymas right now. I don't look for him to be able to beat Hayden this weekend unless he can get in front of him off of the start. But I do think if he can at least stay within 30 points of Hayden leaving High Point, I think he could potentially make up some points in Southwick and stay in this title fight. So just look for Tom to ride solid, probably be second or third overall. High Point doesn't seem like a track that would really suit Tom's style, but with the start, he could definitely be a contender for the race wins. Really, I think the thing he needs to do is just make sure that he doesn't have any type of catastrophic mistakes and just gets through cleanly with the podium. Moving on to Chance Hymas. So Chance had that awesome ride last weekend in Thunder Valley. He ended up getting that moto win, and really, he had the speed to do it. He was the fastest guy in that main event as far as lap times go. And even Hayden said on the podium that he just didn't have the speed to run with Chance. Obviously, the fitness is there, but also the speed is there. I'm still really concerned about him racing with that torn ACL. Obviously, it's not hindering him at the moment. My only thing is that one leg dab in the corner or something like that, his leg gets caught, or even if he gets bumped in the corner or something, that really could be the end of his season. Realistically, if he can stay healthy, I do expect him to probably go through the rest of motocross and then also race supercross and then potentially go in to get it repaired. I think that would be an ideal situation. Obviously, there is no truly ideal situation here, but that's what I would expect in a best case scenario. Next up, we got to talk about the chef, Levi Kitchen. So Levi didn't quite ride as good as I was expecting. We did see some pretty stellar results at Thunder Valley last year, and I kind of expected him to be fighting for the podium this year as well. Unfortunately, this year he did make a couple mistakes, and I think there's even an argument that you could make that his teammate Ty Masterpool was actually the better of the two. Levi did end up beating Ty in the overall on the day. Ty was the fastest qualifier, and he also passed Levi in moto number 2. Now, as much as things are seemingly getting a little bit ugly for Levi, he is still in the fight as of right now. He's only 2 points behind Chance and Tom, and as of right now, he's still the leader of the Super Motocross point standings, even ahead of Hayden. I am pretty concerned, though, as he is kind of trending down right now, and last year at High Point, he got 9th overall. He didn't really do that well, and he was coming off a podium from the round before last year. So realistically, I think that he's probably going to fall out of the title fight this weekend. But if he can rebound, that would be awesome to see. However, I do not expect it. Next guy up is going to be Joe Shimoda. So Joe is barely still in the title fight. We did see a little bit of signs of life with that third place moto finish in moto number 2. The good news is that we know Joe is capable. We've seen him go 1-1 before in motocross, and we know that Honda is capable, as we just saw Chance Hymas win on it. Joe has been off to a slow start, but he has also been consistent, so he's just barely hanging on 5th in points right now. I do think he needs to beat Hayden this weekend in some capacity to stay in the title fight, but he usually comes on strong at the end of the year, so he could turn things around, but usually it is too little too late. So look for Joe to try to get things going this weekend in High Point, and if he can't, then he's just probably going to be going for race wins from here on out. Right behind Joe, we have Jalek Swoll. Now we got to talk about Jalek, and you need to keep your eyes on Jalek. He is arguably the better of the two Triumph riders right now. That Triumph does look pretty capable, and he's been extremely consistent so far this season. Now, all of that's great, but the main reason that I want you guys to keep your eye on Jalek this weekend is because in 2021, he ended up winning High Point, not a moto. He won High Point, the overall, beating Jet Lawrence, Justin Cooper, Hunter Lawrence, and Joe Shimoda, among many other talented riders. And I would argue he's riding way better this year than he was in 2021. So keep your eye on Jalek. Not saying he's going to win, but what I am saying is you never know what he's going to do, and I guarantee you he feels good at this track. Behind Jalek, we have Pierce Brown. So Pierce, there's really not much to say about him. He's very fast, very capable, and he's been getting very bad starts. His average first lap position right now is 13th, which if you compare that to everyone else around him in the top of the field is really bad. This field is too deep and too fast to be coming from that far back and still be able to get good results. So if Pierce is able to manage a top 5 start, look for him to probably stay right around that top 5. After Pierce, we have Julian Beaumer. So Julian is having a great rookie season. I really like what I'm seeing out of him. He's quietly doing his laps, getting his experience, staying safe, and riding fast. So cool to see that. Hopefully he can get through the rest of the season healthy. At High Point, I expect him to probably be right around 10th. If he does get a good start, I don't look for him to battle with any of those guys too much. He's just going to ride within his limits, I would expect. Don't expect too much from Julian this weekend at High Point, but look for something special out of him next season. Moving on to Ty Masterpool. So Ty is getting to be pretty interesting to watch. We've seen him have a few flashes now this season, and we're only 3 rounds in. Obviously, he did switch to that 250 at the last second, so I'm sure he's still getting used to it and making changes as he goes. The last time Ty raced at High Point on a 250 was in 2021, where he went 7th overall, just in front of Hunter Lawrence. So he's definitely capable of putting in some reasonably good results there. I expect him to do much better this weekend. I'm hoping he can get inside the top 5. I think he is capable. The reason I say that is if you look at his results from last year at High Point when he was on the 450, he was sticking right with Cooper Webb and ready to fight for a moto podium when he did end up tipping over. But he still rode really well, and I think he's capable of doing the same this weekend. We saw him ride well in High Point last year, and we saw him ride well last weekend on that 250. So it seems like he's all set up for success this weekend. Keep your eye on Ty. Rounding out our top 10, we have Joey Savatgy. So Joey has officially boarded the struggle bus. Unfortunately, Joey has just had issue after issue, and he has shown quite a bit of speed at times. It still feels like Joey could kind of pop off randomly at any point. We really don't have any data on him at High Point as of recently, especially on the 250. My only concern is we did see a little bit of a dip in his overall speed at round number 3 in Thunder Valley. And I would theorize that that's not necessarily a dip in his speed, but just that everyone else is kind of catching up to him now that they've had a few rounds of motocross to get their testing in and get their bike setups and just get used to the speed of motocross again, where Joey came in riding motocross all season long, testing motocross all season long, and he was already up to speed. So theoretically, these guys were probably behind the 8 ball when compared to Joey. So it could be that we're seeing that advantage kind of evaporate, or it could have just been that Joey didn't like Thunder Valley. So keep an eye on Joey. If he can rebound this weekend, then that would be great to see. But if not, I do expect him to be around a 5th to 10th place guy moving forward. Then before we move away from the 250 class, there's a few guys who are trending up who I think you should keep your eye on this weekend in High Point. The first of which being Cody Schock. So Cody, we all saw what he did in Supercross. He looked great, and he kind of got off to a slow start in motocross. Obviously, it's a deeper field as both classes are now together as one large class. Cody said himself that he was just hoping to get top 15s, but he was unable to do even that. However, last weekend he did look a lot better. He was able to run inside the top 10 and ended up finishing just outside the top 10 overall. He scored significantly more points than he has in the previous 2 weeks, so look for Cody to keep the ball rolling, and if he can get off to a good start, he could probably be in there fighting for a top 10, which would be really good. Next, I want to talk about his teammate Mark Phineas, who was arguably the best Club MX rider out of the three that were out there, and although he didn't quite get as good a result as Cody last weekend, he did show quite a bit of speed. He got a rough start in Moto number 1, but he bounced back good in Moto number 2, and he's still scoring a lot of points. On top of that, he is a true rookie, so he's just out there learning the tracks, getting experience, and really, he's one of the best looking rookies out there. I'm really excited to see what he can do with his career. He's kind of catching me off guard with how much speed he has. So just keep your eye on Mark this weekend. If he can get off to a good start like Cody, then he could really be in there for a top 10 as well. Last guy I want to talk about, and I know this might make some of you guys roll your eyes, but I want to talk about Evan Ferry. So Evan, we've seen the drama with him and Triumph departing, and he's kind of been through a laundry list of teams throughout his career. His professional career has been kind of weird. He only raced one Supercross race, and then that was it. And he's been basically non-existent in motocross. He looked really bad at Paula, and things were really just looking bad for him in general. The reason I want to bring him up, though, is because he did almost score a point last weekend. He was one position off in one of the motos, so at least he is trending upwards, and I do want to at least give him a shout out for continuing onward and at least persevering and also improving. Moving on to the 450 class, obviously first up we have to talk about Jet Lawrence. So we saw Jet go down in round number 2. We all know what happened there. He bounced back very good in round number 3 in Thunder Valley. I knew Jet was capable, but I did not expect him to win the overall like he did. With the way things are looking right now, I do expect him to take over the points lead after Southwick. But for now, he still has to get through High Point, and it could be interesting to see him riding at High Point. That was the first time we saw a kink in his armor last season when he ended up going down and letting Kenny lead some laps and almost kind of threaten him for the moto win. He did end up catching back up to Kenny and taking back the lead. But nonetheless, as much as Jet did have a perfect season last season, this was probably his least perfect race that he had last season. So potentially there could be some room for these guys to get in there and mix it up with him this weekend. I definitely think that Hunter and Chase both need to get in there and try to disrupt whatever momentum that he is already rebuilding. If he's able to go 1-1 this weekend, then everyone's in a lot of trouble. Next up, we have his brother Hunter. So Hunter, it was awesome to see him get his first moto win. We all knew he was capable, but with Jet winning so many motos last year, it's hard to say how many people are even going to get moto wins this season, but it is pretty cool that we already have 3 different moto winners this season. So if nothing else, shout out to Hunter for being able to do that. But moving into High Point this year, we saw him do fairly well there last season on the 250, and I do expect that to translate this weekend. He did look very discouraged after Moto number 2 last weekend, so I do think he's going to be fighting some demons with his brother, holding him off in Moto number 2. We'll have to see how he does with that. I hope he can get off to a better start than Jet to make things interesting. But based off of how things went last weekend, if Jet gets behind Hunter and he's able to stick with him and keep his pace, I do expect Hunter to start thinking about what happened last weekend and potentially cave in under that pressure. I personally think that with the way High Point develops and the downhills that the track has, that Jet is going to have a speed advantage over Hunter this weekend. So realistically, I think that Hunter is going to need a much better start than Jet. However, I do expect Hunter to most likely be on the podium overall. Moving on to Chase Sexton. Man, did we see Chase blow it last weekend. So he had an awesome ride in round number 2, and then in round number 3, everything went out the window. That huge points lead that he had accumulated is down to nothing. He's no longer the points leader, so that could potentially take some pressure off of him moving into round number 4. But realistically, I think it actually adds more pressure. He did show that he had the speed, but he made a mistake in each moto and went down in each moto. So really didn't like to see that. Want to see all these guys up there contending for the race win. Chase did not race High Point last year, so it's hard to say exactly how he's going to gel with that track. Obviously, he's on a different bike anyways, so whatever data we did have is kind of irrelevant. I do personally think that High Point is going to develop a lot like Hangtown did this year, so potentially he could be out there sending it again. If Chase is feeling good on the bike, I do think he'll have the speed to run down and keep up with Jet. He was able to at least pass Jet for the first time last weekend, so if anything, that's probably the one good thing you can take away from that race. But then we all know that Jet was injured, so realistically, I'm not sure that there's any good takeaways from last weekend. He just needs to move on and try to regroup this weekend. He's still ahead of Jet in the points, but at this point, he's going to have to beat Jet a lot of times to be able to go ahead and contend for this championship. He can't just go in there and get second behind Jet and expect to be a title threat. So I'm sure Chase knows that. Look for Chase to come out swinging this weekend. I do think he has a real chance at the overall. Behind Chase, we have Justin Cooper. So I'd say Justin is clearly the next guy who could potentially get another moto win. He's definitely the fourth guy. It was really cool to see him do so well last weekend. However, it doesn't seem like he's exceptionally good at High Point, so I look for him to probably just get through here with the top 5 and then maybe continue building momentum through the rest of the season. Moving on to Aaron Plessinger. So Aaron had that awesome ride in round number 2, and then he just kind of settled in last weekend. Now, he did struggle pretty severely here last year at High Point. He got 8th overall, which doesn't sound too bad, but if you look at the depth of the field that year, it was pretty unacceptable for where he was at, especially considering the results he had earlier on that year. I don't think Aaron exceptionally likes this track, so look for him to just try to get through the weekend safely. He has been extremely consistent this year, which is really cool to see, and he was extremely consistent last year. So just look for Aaron to be right there in the top 10, probably closer to the top 5, but not in the top 5. After him, we have Jason Anderson, and we saw Jason really get in there. He's not afraid to mix it up with the Lawrence brothers, or anyone really. We know that he has an issue with the Lawrence brothers. So what I'd like to see is just to have him get a really good start and just be not a roadblock, but at least make things interesting as the guys have to come up and pass him, whether it be Chase or Jet or Hunter, just kind of make things a little bit more interesting to watch. I do think he's definitely a top 5 guy, but he's also definitely not in the top 3 tier. I do think he could have something for J Coop in the right circumstances, but unless one of those top 3 guys makes a mistake, I don't look for him to be on the podium. After him, we have Justin Barsha. So keep in mind, Justin is still dealing with that knee injury. He hasn't been really specific on what's going on, but it sounds like it's not a total catastrophe. He's just kind of dealing with some setback as far as his knee goes. Justin could be a real contender. He's definitely a top 5 guy as he got 4th last weekend. Now, I don't expect him to be in the top 5 this weekend, but just keep in mind he's right there ready to fight for that top 5. Behind him, we have Dylan Ferrandis, who's really not looking that good considering that he won the championship just a few years back. It feels like this could be Dylan's farewell tour. However, I would be pretty curious to see what he could do with a whole shot or if he's just vibing with the track. I think he still could have that podium speed. And if the stars align, I do think he could get a moto win, but for now, he's right there just fighting to get inside the top 10. Behind him, we have Malcolm Stewart. It's cool to see Malcolm out there on the track. He's not really doing anything too flashy. It feels like he's just cashing a paycheck and stacking points for Super Motocross. It would be cool to see Malcolm get up there and fight for a top 5, but for now, it feels like he's pretty much locked in for either 8th or 9th place. Rounding out our top 10 on the 450s, we still have Freddie Noren, who's on the bubble, being chased down by Christian Craig, but for now, Freddie's still inside the top 10. So awesome to see that. A privateer effort in the top 10 is nothing to be ashamed of. It's actually something to be quite proud of. We all know what Freddie is capable of. He didn't do very good at High Point last year, but I don't necessarily expect him to struggle this year. He looks good and he looks comfortable. Look for Freddie to be inside the top 15 both motos, and if I would love to see what Freddie could do with a whole shot, but realistically, he'll probably still fade just to around that 8th or 9th spot. So either way, look for Freddie somewhere between 9th and 15th. Then right behind Freddie, we have Christian Craig. So Christian is still coming back from that elbow injury. Now it does seem like he's getting himself together, which is really cool to see. He was inside of the top 10 in both motos, which is way better than he was at the start of the season. Look for Christian to continue to build. I do think he's better than guys like Barsha and Stewart outdoors. He just needs to get some confidence back and get his program rolling. hopefully he can do that this weekend in High Point. Lastly, in the 450 class, I have 3 of those guys that I want to highlight who are trending up. The first of which is Justin Hill. He really struggled to get points at round number 1, and now he's well within points, almost inside the top 10. So cool to see that. He is taking a break from the series now. So unfortunately, we will not see Justin racing with us this weekend, but he is coming back for 4 more rounds down the road. Also, Marshall Welton has been riding really well, and he's actually quietly getting quite a bit of points. So I do look for him to be able to potentially qualify for SMX on the 450, even though he raced the 250 in all of Supercross. And then lastly, we have Grant Harland, who has been basically coming back to his full form that he had last year. As previously mentioned, Grant had a pretty gnarly injury at the end of last season, so it is great to see him coming back to form. Look for him to be fighting for top 10s by the end of the season, but this weekend in High Point, he'll probably be right around that top 15. Moving on to the track itself at High Point. Despite the name, it is not at elevation like we were last weekend. It's only around 1,000 feet in elevation. However, it does have quite a bit of elevation changes on the track, and that's really, to me, one of the main features about High Point. It definitely does have some man-made jumps, but not as much as some of the tracks, especially like Fox Raceway or something like that. Look for a lot of the passing to come down the steep downhill before the 180 right-hander as they go right back up the hill. That is going to be probably one of the key passing points there, just before the finish line. We usually see some pretty cool lines coming in, whether it be the outside or the inside. There's usually a lot of line choices there, and there's some pretty good line choices all around the track. I do want to talk about the weather for this weekend. The high for Saturday is only 82, so it shouldn't really be that hard on the guys as far as heat goes, especially when compared to, say, round number 2. However, there is another thunderstorm cell forecasted in the area, but this time it's Friday night. So depending on how that develops and if it ends up pushing into Saturday morning, that could affect the guys, especially, again, if there's lightning. I'm not overly concerned if it rains, especially just Friday night. I'm sure the track will be able to handle that. But just keep your eye on practice if the track is pretty slick from the rain, or if somehow the thunderstorm ends up overlapping into Saturday morning. That could potentially mess with practice times and maybe even push the start time of the race back a little bit. Now, with all that being said, that's going to go ahead and do it for our High Point preview show. If you guys stuck around the whole time, I really appreciate you doing so. It means a lot. I'm going to keep bringing you guys videos all season long. And I'm also working on bringing you guys other story type videos, as I've mentioned before. Right now on the community page, we have a poll going on who you would like me to do a mini documentary story type video on. So if you haven't already, head over there and cast your vote on that. And then look forward to when we will be dropping our first mini documentary style video. Should be in the next couple weeks or so. So like I said, keep your eye out for that. I really do appreciate all of the kind comments that you guys are leaving and all the support you're bringing me on this channel. It means a lot. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.